When I was a young man of about 21 or 22, I was rich in life, but not in wallet. I stumbled across a fascinating book while I was working in a bookstore in Victoria, British Columbia, Canada. And it was titled The Tao or the Tao of Health, Sex, and Longevity by a Daniel Reid. At this point, I was deep into the blue pill world, and I knew nothing of MGTOW. But I think that this book planted a very small seed in my mind that would eventually lead me to where I am today. However, it took more than just reading this book several times to even get me prepared to swallow the red pill. It took me 2 decades of experience as well, which included many successes, but even more failures. Now, this book, I believe, first published in 1989, was by no means a so-called MGTOW book. But looking back on it some 20 years later, I realized that there were many gems within this book that could easily be adopted and applied into the life of any red-pilled MGTOW man. So before I start going into the book, let me share a little bit about the author.
The author Daniel Reid was born in 1948 in San Francisco and spent his childhood in East Africa. After completing a Bachelor of Arts degree in East Asian Studies at the University of California, Berkeley in 1970, and a Master's of Arts degree in Chinese Language and Civilization at the Monterey Institute of International Studies in 1973, Reid moved to Taiwan, where he spent 16 years studying and writing about various aspects of traditional Chinese culture, focusing particularly on Chinese medicine and ancient Taoist health and longevity systems. In 1989, he relocated to Chiang Mai, Thailand, where he continued his research and writing until 1999, when he immigrated with his wife Snow to the Byron Bay region of Australia, where he now makes his home.
Much of what Mr. Daniel Reid has written in this book is focused towards men, and shares many techniques on traditional Eastern disciplines men can practice in their lives today to live longer, healthier, and happier through diet, exercise, meditation, and sex. Now, as I said before, this is not exactly a MGTOW book, but it is certainly written by a man with concerns for men and their lives. I'd like to share with you excerpts from this book, which I believe tie nicely into the healthy habits of any MGTOW men, and hopefully it is informative and beneficial to anyone listening. I won't read it from front to back, but rather pick out parts I believe are most important to men today. Now, not without intent, I want to start by focusing more on the issues of men and their sexuality, because I believe this is the most dominant force that drives men's passions, and this force must be understood, and to a certain extent, it must be tamed, in order for men, especially young men, to be better equipped to deal with the outdated gynocentric world that we live in today. The first part I will read is from chapter 6, and it's titled The Tao of Yin and Yang, and along the way I will interject with my own opinions.
The Chinese have always held the Taoist view that sexual relations between male and female are the primary earthly manifestation of the universal principles of yin and yang. As such, the Chinese regard sex to be as natural and indispensable to human health and longevity as rain falling on the fields is to plant life. The intense sense of guilt attached to sexual matters in Judeo-Christian traditions, as well as Muslim traditions, is, in Chinese eyes, one of the most unpleasant and incomprehensible aspects of Western culture. Traditional Western hypocrisy towards sex has prevented serious study of human sexuality in the Western world until only a few decades ago. Like everything else in Western philosophy, sex is viewed through the lens of dualism. It is seen as either sacred in matrimony or profane out of wedlock, with no room for anything in between. The Chinese, however, do not draw distinctions between sacred and profane sex. As far as Taoists are concerned, the only important distinctions regarding sexual activities are those between healthy and unhealthy habits. The Chinese approach the subject of human sexuality with a blend of curiosity and reverence, just as they do all natural phenomena. Since sexual relations are as fundamental to human life as eating and sleeping, Taoist adepts devoted a lot of time and thought to researching its every aspect and implications for human health and longevity. In a society happily free of sexual repression, Taoist physicians took a long and careful look at human sexual behavior, and they candidly recorded their findings in journals and books couched in the usual florid Taoist terminology. Consequently, the Chinese have been able to approach and study sexual relations between man and women with open eyes and open minds, and they have, over 3 millennia, become the world's most astute observers of human sexuality, as well as the most inventive lovers.
Now I'm going to interject here a little bit. Our human culture and the relations between men and women it's always been this balance of yin and yang, or these complementary opposites. And this goes as far back as recorded history and beyond, as far back as we can imagine. Religion even goes into pre-recorded history type events. Whether you believe it or not, it's still there. And that relationship, that yin and yang balance, still exists between men and women. We're not the same. We are complementary, and we are to be balanced. But if that's true, and the book that I am reading to you now is taking it from some very great sources, from Eastern history and mythology, from the Orient. But if this is true, and it was also true in all other parts of the world, my question is this: why has that balance disappeared today? Why is our dynamic out of balance today? What has happened between then and now? What has happened between, well, we're talking about China. What has happened between gunpowder, paper, and today? Seriously, what has happened? And before you try to rest your mind into conspiracies, consider the past. Consider what was the driving influence of the human species. I mean, before you go into the conspiracy of it was all dictated by politics and they invented feminism just to destroy the human condition and the man and woman relations, that's all bullshit. It's bullshit. It's a conspiracy. It doesn't exist. And the only people that follow that are political morons and religious morons. And regardless if the human species came from China or Western Europe, the balancing act for all time between men and women, you know, the foundation of society, has always rested very peacefully on this linchpin of gynocentrism. The balancing act of yin and yang rested on the linchpin of gynocentrism. In other words, men had to be disposable in order for our species to exist and to evolve. Men had to be disposable. They had to put women and children first. It's as simple as that. So, regardless of bullshit conspiracies, please don't go there. Let's consider another dynamic. Let's consider another influence that may have been introduced into our evolution, that may have changed the traditional concepts of yin and yang. Rather than the yin and yang being balanced on gynocentrism, what has changed? It's very simple. Men and women have always been complementary, opposites of one another. I mean, this is measurable and observable in all sexually dimorphic species on the planet, whether it be insect, bird, reptile, or mammal. The only difference is that human beings, they have a mind, and it seems to strive to evolve by manipulating the environment around them. So the only difference between today and yesteryear is the advancement of technology and how it influenced human politics. It's that simple. If you consider that it was only a difference of 56 years between the time that human beings took flight into the air and until they landed on the moon, we have advanced technologically so fast, we haven't been able to catch up with this yin and yang balance. All right, now at this point, I'm just going to go back and quickly paraphrase everything I've been referencing from this book. And this book does a wonderful job of pointing out the balancing differential between human men and women. But you have to remember it does so by taking examples from a past human history, before we had developed and manipulated the world around us to a point where our technological advances had long surpassed our biological evolutionary programming. And that programming was to always maintain a sexual balance. Yes, a sexual balance. Men and women, sexuality, that is our core. It maintained a sexual balance, and that balance was rested on the cultural pin of gynocentrism. But that is no longer necessary. As a species, we humans have outgrown our britches. Gynocentrism is no longer needed to propagate the human species into the next century. As a species, we humans have shed our gynocentric cocoons. The fate of our continuing existence, it no longer rests on the shoulders of men that must die for women and their progeny. This is ridiculous. Men have taken the fire that they engineered and turned it into rockets. And in that short span of time, the sexual dynamics between men and women has become out of balance. Look around you. Feminism is a last-ditch effort by unfit women to hold on to their gynocentric control that they've always had since we engineered fire. And further, traditionalism, it is the last-ditch effort of unevolved men. These unevolved men helplessly flailing in an ever-evaporating pool of nostalgia, where once his life meant more when it was worth less than the women and children that he protected. They are like drug addicts, addicted to the past. They cannot let it go. There is no conspiracy, ladies and gentlemen. Men, as engineers of the species, have dropped the ball. And as we focused on turning fire into rocket fuel, we have forgotten to maintain our control over the sexual balance, the sexual yin-yang between the man and the woman of our sexually dimorphic species. We need to take a step back. MGTOW are the evolution of men. We are the evolution of the human race. And I swear to God, it happens every few hundred years. As soon as technology gets advanced, as soon as someone invents the next wheel, men have to take a step back and regroup and then reinvent the relationships between men and women. The sexual relationships between men and women, which what propagates the species. And this is all changing very quickly in this age. We are in an incredible time to be alive to witness this. So don't get too down on yourself, my MGTOW brothers. But remember this, we are the evolved man. The MRAs that you see spouting their bullshit and traditionalism, they are not the evolved species. They are dying. They are dying out. They are holding on to a shadow. And the women that are whining and crying and clawing every second to hold on to their gynocentric control from the past, they are a dying species as well. Anyway, my MGTOW brothers, I'm going to continue reading this book from the Tao of Health, Sex, and Longevity in the next episode. Stay tuned. It's only going to get better. Love you all. Take care.